Two new hubs for your M4 Mac Mini? Let's talk about it. Welcome back to the channel. So today we have a fun one. I have two different hubs here, and these are two hubs for your M4 or M4 Pro Mac Minis, and then they're actually by a company called Minisopuru, and I'll put up, how you spell that right up here so you can see it. Now, actually, I've done a couple of videos on this company before, and they're down, I actually have a hub sitting there below my iMac I use for maybe a couple of years now. It's worked phenomenal. So I wanted to check these out. These are for the M4 Mac Mini. The claim to fame on these things is they both have SSDs that you can actually throw an SSD in them, so they have SSD enclosures inside of them. So what I'm going to do in this video, it's going to be really simple. I'm going to show you kind of the build quality of both of these. I'm going to start with this one over here first, and then I'm going to go through the ports, and then I'm going to go through some speed tests on the SSD to show you how they perform. And then at the end of the video, I'm going to show you which of these two do I prefer and why. And that's kind of the important thing here. Now, you could be totally different depending on the features, because these are, they're quite different actually, and I'm going to tell you why. But I prefer one of them over the other one. You could be different, but if you want to hear that, stay tuned to the end of the video. Let's get into it. Okay, so we're going to start with this one first. This is the first hub here, and I'll go through price and the name of it in a second. But what I wanted to say is this one actually, the claim to fame of this one is your Mac Mini sits on top of it, all right? And I've taken a whole bunch of pictures and videos, so I'm going to show you those interchangeably throughout this video so you can see what I'm talking about. But your Mac Mini sits on top of it. It has this little cutout over here. I don't know if you can see that, but I'll show you a close-up of that as well. But when you put your Mac Mini on it, it has a little hole there so you can stick your finger in there and turn the Mac Mini on and off, so that's good. So it leaves room for you to actually reach the power button. It's full metal construction, and since it sits on top, some people might wonder, does it affect Wi-Fi and stuff like that, which we'll talk about in one second. And on the back of it here, you do get a slot here. It's an SSD slot for an M.2 drive, an NVMe drive. We'll talk about that in a second as well. So that's kind of cool. So I mean, obviously, if you want additional storage, these are going to be like a 10 gigabit per second connection. It's not Thunderbolt, so you're going to get up to hopefully around 1,000 megabytes per second, which we'll talk about in a second. We'll do some testing on that to show you what it's actually getting there. So that's where you can go ahead and get some extra storage in there. Now let's just look over here at the web over here. Now this is what it's called. It's called the Minisopuru iExpandMate Mini 4 Pro right here. Kind of a long name. It's $99.89 right now, but you can see it's got a $10 coupon right now, so maybe $89. And you can see this person again reaching underneath it there to actually turn it on and off, all right? So it does come with that $10 coupon. That's the name of it. Let me just go through some of the ports really quickly. So on the very front of it over here, actually, this is the front of it. The front of it has just two USB-A 2.0s, and those are basically going to be like 480 megabytes per second. Those are for plugging in a keyboard or a mouse, simple things like that. It's not really good for data transfer at that speed. Then over here we have the TF and the SD card reader, and that's up to 104 megabyte per second. So actually I tested that. I was getting somewhere in the high 90s, so that holds fairly true there. Pretty good, pretty quick SD card reader. I'm not going to complain there at all. And then on the back of it, it's got a USB 2.0 again, so it's another, it's not really that fast, obviously, but it's going to be for adding accessories and stuff. It's got the audio jack. Now here's the other thing it's got that the other one does, and it's got an HDMI port, all right? And it says up to 4K at 60, so 4K 60 hertz, and you can go ahead and take that with a grain of salt. So if you want dual monitors, you'd plug one into here, and then you can plug one into your Mac Mini, getting the second monitor. But there's no capability of having two monitors off of this, just the one in the back through the HDMI. Keep that in mind. And then there's like a USB-C port, but that's actually your host port that goes into the Mac Mini. So that's not really an actual port, all right? But overall, so far, that's kind of the ports involved. And let's just talk now about, the SSD, which is really the reason to be buying this. All right, first of all, the type of SSD that you can actually put in here. If you look at my screen over here, it's an M.2, and it says up to 4 terabytes. And again, it's a 10 gigabit per second M.2 PCI NVMe enclosure, all right? So you can expect around 1,000, somewhere in there, realistically. It takes all different sizes, and here you can see the different sizes. And then over here, it's the M key and the B plus M key, just if you want to know what it actually takes there. That's pretty simple overall. I just wanted to show you. Now, what I'm going to be testing with today, I have two different drives. I have a 990 Evo Plus here. I'll show you a picture of that. I also have the O7000 by Oracle. This is actually a pretty good drive, believe it or not. It's kind of new to this, new to the scene here. I'm going to be testing with that one as well to see if we have any differences there, and then we'll kind of report back at the end of it. But let's go ahead and do some testing. All right, we're going to be starting with the Oracle drive first. If you look at my screen here, let's go ahead and do a Blackmagic speed test here. As you can see, we have 970. It's kind of holding there around 975, 74 on the writes. On the reads, we're able to get about 809 megabytes per second. You can see the speeds here on the writes in the reads there. So we're going to go ahead and stop that. Now I actually tested the Evo drive as well, and I was actually almost within just a couple megabytes per second there. So it was exactly almost the same there. So it didn't really matter on the drives, actually, of those two drives specifically. I mean, you could obviously other drives could change, but if you use those two drives, I'll have links in the description. You can expect speeds there, and those are pretty reasonable speeds, almost 1,000 there on the writes. That's pretty good overall. I mean, you can't complain with 10 gigabit per second connection like that. So I think that's a pretty big plus for this one here. And, that's overall, I think that's right where it needs to be. Okay, the next thing I wanted to do, if you look at my screen over here, I'm going to be moving 50 gigabyte of files over here. I'm going to be moving it into the Oracle drive just to see if, obviously, how fast this is going to take, see if the drive slows down or not. So we're going to go ahead and start this. I might pause it. I mean, obviously, I may cut this and then come back and let you know in a second. But look how fast it's going already. I have the timer down here. So we're going to see how long this takes to move 50 gigabytes of data. We're copying it to the actual drive in the hub right now. And we'll report back here in a second to see where it kind of comes out. All right, so we're getting down to crunch time here. You can see it's almost done here. I'm going to try to stop it as close as I can within reason here. Let's just see what I do here. So stop it. I kind of started and stopped it there, but around 49 seconds. 49 seconds is close enough. So it actually was able to do 50 gigabyte data transfer, onto the device in 49 seconds. So that's even a little bit faster than 1,000 megabytes per second. And as you can see, like sometimes Blackmagic is not always perfect. It was saying 970, 980. We're getting a little bit over 1,000 there. So I think overall that's really a good rating, and it didn't drop at all. On the reading there, it actually held really strong over 50 gigabytes. I did try it on 100 as well, and the same thing. It holds strong over that. Obviously, your mileage could vary if you don't put the thermal tape on and stuff like that correct, but overall, so far, really good. All right, finally, what I wanted to do in this one specifically, since we actually put the Mac Mini on top of it, I just want to see how, does it affect the Wi-Fi, all right? Now, don't worry about my Wi-Fi speed. People always comment on that. I'm in a different spot when I tested this. I tested this earlier. I'm pretty far away from my router and stuff, so don't worry about that. I mean, it's what is relative when I have the actual Mac Mini on top of this versus when I just have the Mac Mini by itself. That's what we want to take a look at. So here's the reading here. I did this earlier, but this is what I got basically when the Mac Mini was by itself. Obviously, I did a couple of readings. I was getting always around 281.7, 17.1. You can see it there. So then actually when I put the Mac Mini on top of this, what did I end up getting? So after I did that, I lost, a little bit of bandwidth there. So as far as Wi-Fi, it was reading around 245 to 250, about 30 megabytes per second lower is what it came down to. This actually on the uploads was higher. This kind of went back and forth within error, right? But over here, this is what it really affects more. And that was about 30 megabytes per second down, but that's on 280 megabytes per second. So I think, I can live with that, all right? And obviously, if you're using Ethernet on your Mac Mini, that's not even going to matter. So if you use Ethernet on this, that's obviously that's a plus. But if you're using Wi-Fi, it's not as bad as some of the other ones I've seen. It's actually much better. So I could, within reason, I think if you lose like 8 or 10% or something, it's fine, especially when you have really, really fast Wi-Fi. People have way faster than me. So I think overall, that's not a really big issue here. But the other one doesn't have the same problem. We're going to show that to you. But here, it has a little bit of a problem, but not anything like some of the other hubs we tested. So I'm going to give it a plus or at least a pass there. Okay, let's talk about the second hub. I have it sitting right here now. This one's completely different. I'm going to show you why in a second, and we're going to talk about what might be better and what might be worse here. And it's going to really depend on how you use it and who you are. So let me put that cable. So we'll put that down. Now take a look at my screen over here. This one over here is called the Minisopuru iExpand Mate. This is kind of a weird name. The Mini 218B Pro. So you can see it there, $89. So it's a $10 cheaper. Plus, it looks like you do get that $10 coupon as well down here. So that would only be $79. So it's about $10 cheaper than the last one, at least with the sale going on currently. And you can see here's for the M4 Mac Mini. But you can see over to the left there how it orients itself. It actually sits up your Mac Mini just like that picture there. And I'll show you pictures of me doing it over there on my desk over there. So I've slid it in here and it works perfectly fine, right? So this is full metal construction as well again. And you can't complain about that. And the front of it over here is like this little rubber thing. I'll show you a picture of that. And you can actually put your phone on there or an iPad, which is nice if you want that. So that's kind of an added feature on this hub that the other one doesn't have. The other thing is obviously it's got the M.2 slot in the back there, very similar to the other one. And I'll show you, it's very, very similar when we go through the tests here, but that's on the back of it. And a couple things. So like on the main kind of where all the ports are here, I'll go through these. It's got the TF and the SD card reader over here. And that's, again, it's 104 megabyte per second. And I was able to get in the 90s again. So very similar to the other hub. This is the kind of the cool thing. It's got a USB-C port for data on the front. The other one didn't. It only had those USB-A's. Then it's got the two USB-A's, 2.0s, 480 megabytes per second. Those are basically going to be just for like a keyboard and something like a mouse because they're not good for data. But that 10 gigabit per second USB-C in the front is. And then the other bonus on the side over here, the left side, is actually got a USB-A 10 gigabit per second port. The other one didn't have 10, they had only the really slow ones. This one's got a 10 gigabit per second port for data. That's actually good as well. And then on the other side, it's got a headphone jack. You can see it there. And on the back of it, there's no ports. And it's made out of, again, a metal alloy. But your Mac completely sits at a different orientation, right? It sits up. And that's kind of what we want to talk about today. And I'll show you as I'm talking pictures and stuff. So, I thought instantly, like, is it going to help the Wi-Fi or not? And let's talk about this because, obviously it's sitting up here. And I was actually kind of pleasantly surprised at what it actually did here because it's completely different than what I would have thought. All right, so if you look over at my screen here, I tested it around the same time, and I was able to get 308 or 309 basically megabytes per second, and then 20 on the upload, so quite a bit higher, 30 higher, and that's even 30 megabits per second higher when I actually just had the Mac Mini by itself. If you think about it, the Mac Mini sits on the ground by itself without any hubs around it. It's actually pointing down, so I mean, might affect the Wi-Fi signal. But this way, I propped this up and I put it in my little device here, and I kind of pointed it towards the router a little bit, and I was able to get 30 more megabytes per second. So not only is this faster than the other hub, it's faster than just the Mac Mini by itself. It doesn't affect it at all. In fact, it increases it because of the orientation of the Mac Mini. So I was kind of pleasantly surprised there, and I think you should be as well. So I kind of like that overall. Now, whether you like it sitting up like this or not, that's another story. Plus, you can actually have it sitting like this towards you, the long way, or you can have it going the other way. And it's kind of weird because I like it like the long way, but if you do the long way, then you're going to have like, this little bar that you put your phone on kind of facing the other direction, and your ports will be on the side versus the front. So whether, there's some pros and cons there. You can kind of look at the pictures and determine how it's going to set on your desk and stuff. I mean, that's not for me to determine, but there's a lot of ways you can orientate this one, and it's a little bit different. The other one obviously has one orientation. It sits underneath it, and you have to put it only one way because of the plug, the hole there for your finger. But here, you can put it a couple different ways, as far as sliding this around. So it's up to you in this one. Now let's talk about the SSD. All right, on this one, I tested the Oracle drive again inside of the actual hub, if you look at my screen here. And we got such similar numbers here. This is just black magic again, but I was able to get 976.5. I think the other one, the other hub was 974, and then 813 here. So within a couple, we were talking just within a couple megabytes per second between the two hubs. And that's just black magic testing. So there was absolutely no difference there whatsoever. And I was kind of shocked by that. So I think the hubs are exactly the same using the same hard drives. They're going to have the exact same internals, even though they look a little bit different. But overall, they have to be the same because they're so close. It's just like a perfect test there. So, there's no trade-off there as well. You're going to get close to that 1,000, which I think is pretty good. All right, next we're going to test the 50 gigabit per second test here on the Oracle drive. So here we go. We can go ahead and we're going to drop it in here, and let's go ahead and see how long this takes here. So that's 50 gigabytes of data. It's transferring right now, and we have it going here on the timer. Again, that's inside of this actual hub to see if that, how fast it is inside the hub. So I'm going to go ahead and, like I said, come back in a second. I want you to wait through all of this, and then we're going to see where this kind of ends up, and then we're going to show you how it is compared to the other hub. Okay, we're getting close to it. Take a look at my screen here. So it looks like it's going to be very similar here. The other one was like 49 something. And what is this one? We're 49.4 seconds, so almost exactly the same on the 50 gigabyte of data test. So I moved the 50 gigabytes of data, and we got almost the exact same thing as the other hub. So it has to be the same internals there, so don't worry about that. It's all going to come down to the orientation, which one you prefer, and also some of the Wi-Fi signal you could lose on the first hub. Okay, so which is the one I prefer? I actually prefer hub number 2, which is the one sitting here that sits upright like that. And obviously, for me, I use Wi-Fi in my room here and in different places throughout the house. And I love the added, the added Wi-Fi signal I get from it sitting upright. And I don't care how it looks that way. You might be different, right? So I prefer that because I'm going to get that 30 or 40 more megabit per second on my, my Wi-Fi. It's about 8% or 10% difference there, which is pretty good. And even more so than even having just the Mac Mini by itself. That was a huge plus. The other plus of this thing is I do like the 10 gigabit per second USB-C port and the USB-A port. And I don't, as far as using multiple external monitors, if I use 2, I'm just going to use the HDMI on the Mac. And I'm also going to use maybe one of the USB Thunderbolt ports as well for that. So I don't really need it built into the hub. The other one had, obviously, if you remember, if I can grab over there, this one over here that I showed you, the first one, it sits on top of it. This one has the HDMI, but it only has the 4K at 60 for this one HDMI port. So this can do one HDMI, and then you plug one into your Mac. Over here, you have to do both of them on your Mac. So, that's going to make the difference for most people if you're deciding versus that one versus that one. And you may also not like the way it looks sitting up. So I think they're both good choices here. Again, this falls well within the, what I think is acceptable for the Wi-Fi loss, especially when it's sitting on top of it. And this other one actually improves it. And that's why I'm picking that one. So, but you could be totally different. You might need the extra port for your monitor. But I mean, I'm only one person. I always tell people this. This is more of a product showcase. I'm just kind of reporting back my initial testing here. I have not used these long term. I can't tell you to go out and buy them. I'll have links to everything in the description. Of course I will. But I mean, you have to do your own due diligence and look at reviews and do all that kind of stuff, because I'm just one person with two products. My products could work phenomenally. You could get one, it may not work. I have no idea, right? So just want to give you your full disclaimer that I'm just doing the best I can to report what I found. Maybe I'll do a follow-up in a little while and show you how I, over maybe 6 months or something, and say, hey, is this working out good? Okay, so we're going to wrap this up. Just remember that this is by a company called Minisopuru, and you can obviously look them up. I'll have links in the description, or you just look them up on Amazon and you can find them there. Now, the only caveat to the whole thing is it looks like they kind of go in and out of stock. So if they're out of stock, come back, check out my video and click on the link, and then you can go ahead and check every so often to see if you can find it. It'll be there eventually, I promise you. They sometimes have hard times with keeping up with demand, but if it's not there, check back maybe in a week, and it should be. We'll talk to everybody in the near future. Peace.